up, everybody? It's Goddess Z, and I'm here with another podcast episode on Holistic and Spiritual AF. Welcome back, fam. I appreciate you guys so much. We are like over 3,000 downloads. I got like all kinds of people following on Spotify, so I appreciate each and every last one of you guys. I know that you guys are enjoying this podcast episodes, and I've been getting lots of comments on YouTube, and it's just amazing how this is growing. And I'm so grateful that it's being able to help so many of you. Okay. So thank you. I appreciate you. If you're tuning in again, if this is your first time landing on this podcast, then you are definitely in the right space. If you like hearing about topics such as healing, how to connect with your ancestors, activating your divine feminine codes, esoterics, I mean, we go in over here. Myself and my guests, we meet on the first and the third Friday of the month at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I am here on the second and the fourth Fridays of the month coming in with my downloads, my transmissions, and what's turning into a lot of teachings and many classes that they're really loving and eating up over there on YouTube. So definitely be sure to follow me in the respective places. This podcast airs every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, YouTube, pretty much anywhere that podcasts are syndicated. Okay. So you definitely don't want to miss any episodes if that is what you're into. Okay. And today is going to be a solo episode. This is episode 74. This is She Woke, She Remembers, and She Becomes. All right. And so I'm doing something a little different this time on this podcast episode, something that I don't normally do. And that is today I'm not going to be teaching. Today I'm not going to be interviewing anybody. I'm just going to kind of be going through some of my writings. Okay. So about 3 years ago, I really started writing pretty actively. And this was right around the grand finale of a lot of the deeper healing that I had to go through before I started to move into my divine feminine code activation, my ascension, a lot of the things that my purpose, my destiny, a lot of the things that I actually came to the planet for were starting to come to fruition. So, somewhere about, I want to say 2022, I started writing. And it started out to be like these different kind of inspirational quotes that I would text people in the morning, and it would get deep, and a lot of people would, respond to me, and they would be like, damn, did you write that? I mean, my God, you should think about being a writer. And so, I started writing, and I guess in the beginning, it kind of started out a little bit as, like, I guess, me journaling out loud, like my reflections, my journey. But it really turned into something that I didn't expect for it to grow into. And I was able to kind of look at myself and also inspire and motivate other people on their healing journey, right? So I opened up like a Substack and I think a Medium, and I started writing over there. And one of the things I didn't like about my writing over there is I didn't like treating my writing like content. Okay, here go my cat trying to jump in my lap. I didn't like treating like my writings as content, like where I got to churn out something, I got to get something out, I got to get likes about it. It was different. It was sacred to me. It was something that was very sacred to me, and it was very inspirational to other people. Not everybody, because I recognize everything ain't for everybody, and so I'm okay with that. And so I wanted to do something different. And, if you know me, then you know that I'm like heavily, guided by my ancestors. And my ancestors were telling me, you got to write a book. Out of that, the shadow work book came, the 5 stages of shadow work came, the ancestral altar guide came. Those are smaller books. I was super proud of that. But I'm actually working on a larger book this year. And so a lot of that is what my ancestors really wanted me to do with that. And so, something that I'm going to be releasing in later on this year, probably right around the summertime, is going to be a hardcover book. And a volume of all of these different writings over the past 3 years. And so, like I said, everybody's not readers. I get that, but I was an avid reader as a kid. And what I realized is as I started healing things and removing things that were blocking me from being my fullest, highest self, then I started activating things inside of my DNA that had always been there. Okay. So that's what will happen with the healing process. And once we start to heal a lot of the trauma in our DNA, then we start to tap into a lot of the good stuff that we have in our DNA as well. And the writing was one of them. And so I'm super excited to be able to share just two of these writings with you. And like I said, they're on Substack as well as Medium. Now, I've put my stuff behind a paywall now because I know what it is that I'm doing with my writings. But you are more than welcome to go over there. I'll have those links and everything down in the description as always. And I wanted to start with different parts of the journey. Okay. So the first one is called She Woke. All right. And let me make sure I got all this stuff over here so that I can get access to it. Oh, baby, she woke. That's the name of it. Okay. Now, this one's a long one, and y'all bear with me because I don't do audiobooks and things like that. That's actually extremely challenging to do. Y'all don't realize how hard it is to do those meditations and stuff for y'all, okay? But I'm gonna go ahead and read this one for you guys. And by all means, if you're resonating with this, be sure to make some comments down in the comment section. Ask questions if you want to. Like I said, feel free to go check out the writings. Oh, baby, she woke never to go to sleep again. It's another beautiful weekend, and I'm doing what I love to do most, which is unwind and reconnect with myself. This month has been a month of awakening, awareness, endings, and beginnings. Seems like another lesson evolving into transformation. I remember when I used to be frightened by the subconscious taking formation into the material realm. Now I view it as a discovery of deeper worlds inside of me. It seems like I've been going through these for as long as I can remember. I've been conscious for most of my adult life. I started my seeking journey in my early 20s and I never looked back. That journey took me on some amazing rides. What started as meditation morphed into mind, body, spirit connection, spirit guides in the physical and spiritual realm, a plethora of teachers and lifetime friends, all evolving into the next phase of the journey. I remember when I was working as a massage therapist, my whole life consisted of holistic healing and spiritual connections. I felt full and satisfied during this phase of my life. I was in my early 30s and I thought I had amassed quite a bit of knowledge. I had an ex that I stayed friends with for a little while, and he and I shared a kindred connection when it came to holistic and spiritual practices. He and I were the first to ever experience tantric sex with one another. Our relationship was like an energy explosion for spiritual expansion, but it ended just as explosive. We were both hanging on, and the end of what we were both hanging on, and the end of that relationship had come and gone. You know how it is when fear has you trapped in something that no longer serves you. That's all this was. But he remained a little longer for one vital piece of my journey. One day on a phone call, he asked me if I had ever heard of the Book of the Earth. We'll get back to this shortly. During this time, I decided to go off into a career and profession that would allow me to simply focus on money. I struggled with mixing money with spirituality and energy work. I still had some work to do around prosperity mindset during this time. I was a realtor, and I'll never forget my very first client. He was a rental client, and I was a new realtor and desperate for any kind of sale. I took him to view the property and offered to take him to his shop. He had a store inside of the mall that sold Afrocentric products, natural oils, onyx, crystals, shea butter, and black empowerment videos all adorned his quaint little shop in the corner of the building. He had quite a customer base, too. People came up to him like he was a witch doctor, telling him all about their ailments and aches. And he had just the natural remedy for everything. A real local Dr. Sebi. I was amazed at how he knew all of this off the top of his head. He's a really good guy and still is to this day. On the car ride to his store, he saw my ankh and crystal hanging from the rearview mirror. He says to me, "What do you know about that ankh?" This was before I had seen his shop. With such strong conviction and pride, I said, "That's the symbol of life, and that rose quartz is good for healing matters of the heart and bringing the vibration and energy of love into your life." I knew a little something. Hell, I had been on the healing journey for quite a while by this point. I thought I knew all I needed to know, and I was well on my way. He says to me, "That's pretty good. What do you know about melanin?" I said with just as much pride, "Melanin is what gives you the pigmentation of your skin." He said, "Yeah, but what do you really know about melanin?" By this point, we were pulling up to the mall and had reached his destination before he got out, and he said, "Look up a guy named Dr. Laila Africa. Know thyself." Being the seeker that I am, I could not wait to get home to look up that name. Little did I know my life would change forever after that conversation, and I would go into a journey deep into self like I had never gone before. I looked up Dr. Laela Africa on YouTube immediately after our conversation. This was the very first video that changed my life. The Power of Melanin: How Melanin Determines Race by Dr. Laela Africa. After watching this video, I questioned everything I had been taught up until that point. I simply could not fathom living a life on the planet having never heard this information about melanin before. After all, in the United States, there's a big discussion around race, right? Besides the big hush surrounding race. I've always been a want to know why type of person. This was giving me answers that started activating things in my DNA that I had always known, but I couldn't understand or express how I knew these things. How could melanin be so powerful, and how could people who had the most melanin be hated the most? How could melanin be diminished to simply being the thing that pigments our skin? My journey shifted tremendously, and I wanted to know more and more and more. Now, back to the ex who told me about the Book of the Earth. This was random as hell for him to even throw that out there. But I know there are no mistakes or accidents in this here universe. When I started my journey in my early 20s, I went from meditation to yoga and crystals to metaphysics. I jumped into the deep end when I started on my journey, and then I swam to the shore and back to the deep end. I was headed for another journey to metaphysics, and it all started with melanin. By this time, I got the suggestion to check out Dr. Phil Valentine's Book of the Earth. I had already started my journey into melanin. This video series shook me to a whole nother level. Book of the Earth, Part 1, Reverend Phil Valentine. When I finished watching this entire series for about 8 hours straight, I had openings of portals in my spirit body that expanded me to whole entire universes and dimensions of consciousness. Oh, baby, I was woke. And at this point, there was never any turning back to be what that woman I was the day before. I started studying. I went to workshops. I went to classes. My whole world became people who looked like me, who were metaphysical, spiritual, and holistic. That floored me too, because up until that point, I had always been the youngest and the only in those other New Age philosophy classes and workshops. Hmm. They even taught me about what to eat and what not to eat so that I could vibrate higher. Oh, baby, I was woke, never to sleep again. I had already had about 8 years of spiritual consciousness and some evolution as well as healing up until that point, but I had no knowledge of self. I had no idea where I came from and the truth about who I am on a spirit level, on a metaphysical level. I don't usually go into metaphysics too much outside of circles where I know people have greater understanding and overstanding of such subjects. I've learned that if people are not ready to receive that level of consciousness, the information falls on deaf ears. For a brief period, I was in such high emotion about finding out that my entire existence was based on a lie that I found myself distracted with the physicalities of the wrongs that had been done to my people with the most melanin. I started looking up images and videos of police brutality. This was a dangerous and slippery slope. I was part of the Black Lives Matter rant, not the movement. I wasn't actually doing anything about it. I was just spreading awareness about what was happening. I'll never forget the day I told my grandmother about this story about a police officer shooting a guy in the back, and he was black and he was running away from him unarmed. My grandmother said to me, "Baby, they've been doing that. This ain't nothing new." That's when I realized the trauma that she must have seen and experienced in her lifetime. Being a black woman born in America in the late 1930s, the Jim Crow era. Damn, I found myself getting more and more enraged and outraged by what I was seeing. The sheer lack and devaluation of human life, the ability for American culture to be completely desensitized to the murder of certain human beings, the fact that in the 2000s, Black people were still being viewed as less than human by society. I was downright mad as hell, and I felt powerless over the situation, like there was nothing I could do. I almost lost my way in this state of being. Everything was black this and black that, and I was lashing out at everybody. I was hypersensitive and I had lost my way, and I was losing the stories of the magnificence and brilliance of my ancestors. I was making noise. I wasn't doing anything applicable to be able to create the change that I so desperately wanted to see. Knowledge without application is useless. Eventually, I came back around to get back on the beam, understanding the history, not his story. But the actual truth of the earth led me to levels of higher consciousness, and then I was able to see with a third eye vision what is actually being allowed to happen on this planet and why. I truly believe that that phase of my journey was necessary as well. After all, there was trauma stored in my DNA, anger and pain for what was stolen from my ancestors, especially when I knew where I truly came from and that the story in the school book simply wasn't true. I had lived my life and had been socialized and culturally appropriated at an early age, along with my peers, to believe that I was less than because of the color of my skin, and that I would have to work harder to be able to achieve the same results as my lighter peers. They were fed the lie that they were better than people who looked like me, and that everything was promised to them as their forefathers who stole this land and everything else also lied to them and their ancestors too. Having all of this knowledge and truth gave me something I never had. I was smart. I was determined. I was courageous. I'm a healer. I'm empathic. I'm intuitive. But I had no knowledge of self. I was wandering around aimlessly like a chameleon, changing my spots to find some place in this world. Armed with the facts about myself and my ancestors, I began to move differently. I began to think differently. I began to act different. And I began to teach something different to my children. I had my girls coming with me to all these classes, workshops, and spiritual events, having their minds fed with the knowledge and the truth about themselves at an early age. I spoke and spoke empowerment and confidence into my children. Free at last. I continued my journey of meeting more and more empowered melanated beings that looked like me and who had knowledge of who they were. They acknowledged their ancestors. They practiced their traditional spirituality of the ancestors' way, and so did I. The movies that I watched, the art on my wall, the music that I listened to changed into something that was feeding my spirit and enhancing that empowerment about myself, and my girls watched it all. The food that I ate allowed my temple to receive downloads into my spirit daily. I stayed in meditation and uplifting high vibratory conversations. Oh, baby, she was woke, never to go to sleep again. My world depicted positive and uplifting images of melanated beings everywhere. It didn't matter what I experienced in the outside world from other people, because my internal world and my reality were one of empowerment. I had become free for the first time in my life. I had been walking around thinking I was free, and I wasn't. Talk about the ultimate delusional reality. Freedom of the mind, freedom of the spirit, and freedom from the bondage of lies. I recognized that we as a people, had continued to have shackles on our minds. And though our bodies were free, our minds were meant to be enslaved so that we could never get to a place of freedom and empowerment. Over time, we would eventually tear ourselves down, and ultimately, it would look like we had did it to ourselves. Talk about a mind fuck. I stayed in that state of consciousness for a while until my ancestors urged me to move on to a more individual and intimate connection with them. I left the community, but I'll never forget what they instilled in me. The foundational information and education got me to a certain place to reactivate what was already inside of me. And for that, I will forever be grateful to those magical spirits, being, and spirit guides on the planet. I continued my journey carrying everything that I had already had with me, and in working with my ancestors, they showed me the way. They said to me, if you want to create the changes you so desperately seek, start with your children and your children's children. Teach them the way so that they will never again forget who they are. They come from a powerful people, and that must be instilled in them. And they pass the torch to me. Being the healer that I had always been, I felt the urge to step into my position. Along the journey, I encountered people who looked like me and had a tremendous amount of trauma stored in their DNA, trapped without an outlet. My passion for helping people to heal the generational trauma that's stored in them was born. I wanted them to begin to activate higher levels of consciousness and vibration so that they in turn could connect with their ancestors to begin to heal themselves, teaching their children and their children's children. Breaking cycles and changing paradigms creates whole new universes. I truly believe this is the change and this is the way to higher vibratory living and consciousness. When the rest of the planet sees us doing this, everyone else will follow our example. There will always be a few who want to keep the status quo of so called privilege, but we don't worry about them. They no longer have power over our reality and our states of consciousness. I sometimes hear people throwing around the term conscious and woke. To be conscious and higher vibratory requires a constant state of mind and being, which requires inner work daily to maintain that level of consciousness, or you can and will go back to sleep. I've encountered people who think that because I don't participate in the Black narrative that I must not be woke. That couldn't be any further from the truth. That state of mind, as described above, is damaging and useless. I have evolved to higher levels of consciousness since then, and I hope they do the same. My Black narrative is one of empowerment and healing today. We don't beg, we don't complain, and we don't grovel. We narrate our own story. Okay, as I was reading that, I just thought about this is perfect for Black History Month. Even though y'all know, if you know me, we do Black History every day. Just ask my daughters. But that writing right there, I hope you guys enjoy that. Number one. Number two, it brings back so many memories for me because I remember that I could time travel back to being in the car with that brother and him seeing the ankh and me just like completely just busted open from the reality I had been living up until that point. And for me, that's kind of how it started. I think I talked about this on this podcast before. Before I started out on the new age side of things, I was coming straight out of hell and trauma, and I was in a situation where I had to get some healing, and I got introduced to meditation, and that was definitely necessary as well, but that opened up worlds in my inner realm that I was going to need for the rest of the journey. And so I didn't know what to do and where to go. Nobody was talking about that in my family. I come from a family full of trauma, just like a lot of us do. And so I was just kind of going where I could go, and I was doing a lot of new age stuff, and I was doing yoga and going here and breathing stuff, and I was getting some benefit out of that, don't get me wrong. But it got to a certain point where I felt myself being called to my African roots and my African ancestors. I didn't know what the hell that meant, how that was going to happen, none of that. All I know is that my ancestors led me and ushered me to where I needed to be. And that's why I always talk about connecting with your ancestors, because a lot of times, whether you even know, um, you're if just as soon as you start to have the awareness that you need to do that, they're already working on your behalf, and they're going to already line things up. The universe is already going to line things up to allow you to have the experience that you need. And so that's how it was for me. Next thing you know, it's no accident. Like I said, that I end up my very first real estate client is this guy, this conscious woke guy who just really set me on my journey. And I'm always forever grateful to that brother. I actually need to reach out to him. I haven't talked to him in a while, but it was such an amazing journey after that. After that, I started, like I said, my whole world shifted and changed. Okay. And I went through the many different phases. For those of you who have ever woke up, you know how it is. We all go through that phase where we get mad because we start seeing what the hell, like what the fuck, really? And we start seeing that our whole life is a lie. And we start seeing what's going on and how they treating our people. We start really going into the history. And most of the people that I know that are conscious and woke and spiritual, they had to kind of go through this process, but essentially they heal and they end up on a different side of it. But it's like you got to know um, where you come from to know where you're going. Okay, you've got to understand that. And so I even have a symbol of a Sankofa symbol in here, and that's exactly what that means: is that you have to know where you came from to know where you're going, and you have to kind of weed through and decipher through the BS because there's a lot of lies. And in the process of doing that, you're actually getting a tremendous amount of healing and stuff that's necessary for you. It begins to open up portals, and that's what happened for me. And so, like I said, it was a whole lot that happened in between there, honey. Because that I think that I described that experience was like 12 years ago. And before that, like I said, I had been on the journey for I think about 8 years before that. So it took a minute to get there. And then also something else I wanted to talk about is I had quoted Dr. Laila Africa's video, What is Melanin? I actually have that link inside of the story, and I'll have that down in the description for anybody that wants to check that out, as well as Dr. Valentine's Book of the Earth. Okay, so if you're somebody who likes to, that feels resonant with you, the link is there, and then go on your journey. Okay, if you're a seeker, it's going to take you in all sorts of different directions. And I wish you well and happy awakening. Okay, so the next writing that I'm going to read. This one is fairly recent, okay? This one is Let me see. Which one is this one? Ah, yeah, this one is actually really recent. Okay. So this one is called She Who Remembers from Awakening to Ascension. Okay. And so clearly there was a lot that happened from, oh, baby, she woke to this person, this woman, this divine feminine that is embodying and rising into ascension. So I will read this one. This one's not as nearly as long. So if you can hang on and listen to the whole thing. There comes a moment in every woman's life when the world she has known begins to crumble. Not violently, but quietly, softly, almost unconsciously, a subtle shift beneath the surface, a tremor in the spirit that says, something's changing. Most women ignore it at first. She did too. For years, she felt a whisper rise within her during moments of stillness late at night, early in the morning, or during those brief seconds when her mind drifted beyond the noise of the day. It was a voice that didn't sound like her own, yet felt more familiar than anything she had ever known. It felt like home, but foreign at the same time, like a familiar place that had been forgotten. The whisper wasn't demanding, it was patient. It was the kind of voice a grandmother uses when waking a child from sleep, gentle, warm, but unmistakably firm. Wake up, daughter. We've been waiting for you. She didn't understand yet the significance of that call. She only knew that her spirit was beginning to stretch outside the boundaries of her life. The thinning of the old life. Awakening rarely begins with revelation, it begins with discomfort. At first, she simply outgrew things she once tolerated. The conversations that entertained her felt empty, like a big house with hollow rooms. The routines she built her life around felt like cages. The people she kept around out of habit began to feel heavy in her presence. There was no dramatic betrayal, no catastrophic event, just an inner knowing that the life she was living was too small for the spirit she carried. This is what I call the cracking open. The moment the soul begins to reject anything misaligned. To her, it simply felt like something inside her had started peeling away from her old world and reality. And so the questions came. Why am I here? Why does this shit feel weird? Why am I craving solitude? Why do I feel something I can't explain? What am I being pulled toward? These questions mark the beginning of every great spiritual unfolding. If you're reading this and you recognize that sensation, the silent outgrowing of your own life, then you have experienced the first knock of awakening, the return of memory. One morning, she awoke from a dream. The dream consisted of being in a place like the old Aztecan times or the Olmec civilization. The dirt was red like clay, and although I couldn't see myself, she felt herself as a small child because the totem in front of her was a giant. It was an enormous, colorful mass, bright orange, yellows, blues, and greens. Looking around, she didn't notice much else besides the huge ancient relic. A memory that didn't belong to this lifetime rose within her. Not a memory from childhood, but something older, something ancestral. She remembered having this dream often as a child, but it had been years since this mysterious memory would waken her consciousness again. She remembered her great grandmother and the telepathic relationship they had, something deep and layered but simple. These weren't teachings, they were transmissions. She realized she wasn't learning anything new. She was remembering what was never truly lost. This is the moment the veil lifts, the moment the ancestral memory returns, the moment a woman realizes she carries more inside her than she was ever taught to believe. It's the quiet shock of discovering your life has always been guided, even when you didn't know who was guiding you. The great dismantling. Awakening is often romanticized, but the truth is, this awakening dismantles you before it rebuilds you. As she began to remember, she also began to see with a third eye vision that was uncomfortable. She saw the dogma she had inherited without consent. She saw the colonizing narratives that disconnected her from her roots. She saw how her religious upbringing gave her structure but robbed her of spiritual autonomy. She saw the ways her trauma had shaped her identity. She realized that everything she believed had been curated by a world that never wanted her to know who she truly was. This realization brought grief, it brought anger, but it also brought liberation. But above all, it brought responsibility. Because once a woman sees the truth, she can't return to the blindfold that kept her sleeping peacefully. Awakening forced her to step away from her autopilot and into intention. It demanded that she relearn herself. It required her to question her thoughts, her relationships, her fears, her desires, her lineage. This stage of awakening is not gentle, but it's honest. And honesty in its purest form is a spiritual purge, the language of the body. The more questions she had, the deeper she journeyed, the more her body began to speak to her. The experience took on a life of its own, a tightening in the pit of her gut when someone approached her with hidden motives, the constant ringing in her ears in moments of spiritual acceleration. She remembers her ears ringing for a year straight at one point. At one point, she thought maybe she had tinnitus, but she was simply being attuned to a new frequency. Dreams arriving with symbols she somehow understood, emotional triggers revealing ancestral wounds seeking healing. Her body became an altar, sending messages through sensation, intuition, and instinct. Her DNA was awakening, whispering truths her conscious mind had forgotten. Spiritual awakening is not just a shift of the mind per se, it's a cellular restoration. And this is where many women misunderstand their experience. They think they're anxious, they think they're overreacting or too sensitive. But sensitivity is not a flaw, it is an ancestral instrument attuning to the frequency of remembrance. Sensitivity signals activation, reveals alignment, and is the gateway to intuition. Her body was not betraying her, it was preparing her for ascension. Ascension, the rising of a divine feminine. Ascension is often described as light, love, and effortless elevation, but true ascension is earned, baby, through unraveling, through remembrance, through courage, meaning it's work, not something to be idealized like a cute trending topic on social media. It's the grueling metamorphosis process of becoming something society has spent a lifetime trying to keep you from. And most importantly, ascension is not an escape from humanity, but a deeper embodiment of divinity. It is when a woman begins to trust her intuition without needing evidence, establish boundaries that honor her energy, move in alignment rather than people pleasing, show up as her authentic self regardless of who approves, recognize her ancestors as allies, not abstractions, live with intention instead of survival conditioning. Ascension is rising into a place of embodied sovereignty. It's when your decisions flow from truth, not fear, from soul, not programming, from remembrance, not disconnection. She rose gradually, each breakthrough a step upward, each lesson a step inward, each moment of clarity a step forward. As she rose, she realized she was not rising alone. The women who came before her, those who survived, those who resisted, those who prayed, were rising with her, as above, so below. Her awakening was not just personal, it was ancestral, not just for the generations to come, but the ones who came before. She was healing her lineage by becoming who they could not be. This is how we began to live our ancestors' wildest dreams. The woman who remembered. By the end of her transformation, she was not a new woman. She was a revealed woman. Her intuition sharpened, her presence deepened, her boundaries strengthened, and her purpose awakened. She understood that awakening was not a one time event, but a lifelong unfolding, a sacred remembering, a reclaiming of what was always hers and accessible by the roadmap of her ancestors, her identity, lineage, and power. She learned that before the rising becomes the remembering, comes the remembering. And in remembering, she stepped fully into who she always was. Reflections. As you sit with your story, with her story, ask yourself, where have you felt the cracking open in your life? What memories, ancestral or intuitive, have been surfacing for you? What truths are you being called to acknowledge? Where is your body speaking, and are you listening? In what ways is your soul nudging you toward sovereignty? Awakening is not reserved for the chosen. Awakening comes for the ready and is your birthright. If these words find you now, if something in your spirit stirred as you read this, be still, trust, and know that your ancestors may be whispering too. Wake up, daughter. We've been waiting for you. Oh, I feel like I was at the open mic thing. That's a little snap, snap. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that one as well. To me, it seems like these are a little longer than I expected them to be, but this one is very recent, actually. And as you can see, there was a little difference in the writing style as well, because as I was growing and evolving in my writing, so was my writing. And so I tried different things to kind of see what resonates with my writing style. But that was a really good depiction and description of what it means to embody your divine feminine sovereignty. And it takes work to get there. It's not one of those type of things that's like, they said it on social media, honey. I got me some Blue Lotus tea. I had a consultation with somebody and it was on. Like, that is not what happens. Okay. They're like, they need to stop that. Like, they need to cut that out, really, though. Anybody who's done the work, as I always say, there's some layers and levels and processes to this. And, I'm still becoming. That's the thing. But a much different person than I was when I first started cracking open, as I talked about in that writing. And so there's work. There was a lot that went down. There was shadow work. There was tears. There was awareness. There was boundaries. There were letting things go. The healing process continued to expand and go deeper. I started like activating things inside of my DNA, both good and not necessarily pleasant, but were necessary in order for me to be able to heal them and get into the roots of things, right? And one of the things I like that I talked about in here was being yourself, regardless of who approves. And as much as I've talked about not needing validation from other people in other episodes, that's a big one for me now. And my ancestors are firm on that. They like, you get out there, you shine your light. They don't give a damn who like it or who don't, because in certain spaces, particularly when you're at an ascension level, the majority of people are not there. And we're constantly encountering people who are in a third density existence. And so it's challenging, being at work. And if they're too close to you, if you have the ability to just encounter people like grocery store, running errands, that's different. I'm talking about people who are in your inner world, who are constantly trying to bring you to a level that they understand. And a lot of times, what will happen is when we're awakened, when we're highly vibratory and conscious, then we'll find ourselves reducing and dimming our light to be acceptable. And we're not doing that anymore. For those of us who are awakening, who are ascending, you just know you're going to lose some people along the way. The majority of people are not going to like you. And that's usually when you have to check your circle. Like, do I have to be around these people? Where's my tribe at? You know what I'm saying? And so that's kind of what I deal with. But today, I don't care, because I'm showing up as I'm supposed to be. I'm living my best life. I'm living my purpose, and I'm living my destiny. And I'm not going to let anybody pull me away from that. Okay. So hopefully you guys enjoyed those readings, and let me know if you guys like this format, if you want me to do this again. Like I said, definitely stay in touch with me so that you know about the classes, the books, all that good stuff. You can check out my website, holisticandspiritualaf.com, and sign up for the newsletter, because that way you'll be finding out, like, behind the scenes, a lot of the stuff that's going on first, inside of the Holistic and Spiritual AF community. And then also you'll be notified first when the book drops, that has, like I said, like over 50 different types of writings and reflections, and that can help you on your journey, or just help you to kind of go in deeper. So with that being said, y'all, we didn't do it super long today because we didn't have to. That is it until the next episode.